My name is Jeanne Seckinger, S-E-C-K-I-N-G-E-R.
Ms. Seckinger, how you doing today?
I'm good.
Awesome. Tell the jury a little bit about yourself. If you could, just kind of introduce yourself. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school, if you would?
I grew up in Hampton, South Carolina, graduated from Wayne Hampton, went to the University of South Carolina where I got my BS in accounting. After that, I worked a number of years in public accounting. Then I transferred into as a financial analyst with Westinghouse in Hampton. And after the birth of my second child, I stayed home and worked for my husband just a few years. And in 1999, I came to work with the firm on a part-time basis, doing some special projects, and have not left. And that job has grown since that time until I was over all the business aspects and financial aspects of the law firm.
All right. Which law firm are you talking about?
Peters, Murdaugh, Parker, Elsdorf, Diedrich.
Is that PMPED?
That's correct.
Is that what the firm is currently known, or is it known by a different name?
We are now a separate entity that we've reorganized as Parker Law Group, LLP.
All right. And do you know the defendant, Alex Murdaugh, over there?
I do.
Do you see him in the courtroom?
I do.
Can you identify him, please?
He's in the blue jacket and white shirt sitting between Jim and Dick.
Your Honor, can the record reflect she's identified the defendant? Yes. Was he a partner in the law firm you're speaking of?
He was.
Is he a partner anymore?
No.
And we're going to talk about some of those things, the reasons for that here today. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, so I'm going to call it PMPED, what we're talking about. Is that fair?
That's fair.
All right, well, tell me, you talked a little bit about your role in PMPED. What would you consider your role, or how would you define your role, particularly as we're moving into June of 2021?
At that point, I would be CFO/COO, basically overall office management and all financial affairs of the office, over hiring and firing, HR, just any, like I said, any business aspect of the firm.
So CFO, that means what?
Chief Financial Officer.
And COO, that means what?
Chief Operating Officer. And so I kind of combine those jobs.
All right. Are you a lawyer?
I'm not.
Or are you an accountant?
I am.
Do you have a CPA?
I do.
You said you started working for the firm when?
August of '99.
And then when did, was Alec working there at that time, the defendant?
I think Alec came to work the year after me.
Okay. Did you know him prior to that?
I did. I've known Alec since I was 16 years old in high school.
Y'all went to high school together?
We did. He's a few years behind me, but we were in the same school.
And you worked with Alec at the law firm up until September of 2021?
I did.
Let's talk a little bit, if we could, about the law firm itself. And tell me a little bit about the financial structure of the law firm. How does it work that fees come into the law firm, and how do they get dispersed at the end of the year? Can you explain that to the jury a little bit?
Yes. So every fee that any attorney makes is property of the law firm. It comes into the law firm and goes into the law firm's accounts, and it is sitting in kind of what we call a holding account that we just amass the money. We have another account called the operating account that we use to pay the daily bills of the law firm, wages, insurance, office supplies, etc. Each attorney in the law firm is also an employee of the law firm. They receive a paycheck just like most people do, with W-2 taxes taken out and a W-2 at the end of the year. When we get to the end of the year, we figure the net profit of the law firm, basically everything brought in and everything paid out to date. And we distribute that money based off a ratio of what that attorney brought in to total. So if an attorney brought in 10%, he's going to get roughly 10% of the net income at the end of the year. And we do that in a form of a bonus one time at the end of the year.
When is that bonus typically paid?
That bonus is typically paid the last week of December every year.
And is that for most cases and most of the partners, as we're going to call them in the law firm, is that the vast majority of their compensation of the year, is getting it all in one lump sum at the end of the year in December?
That's correct. They receive a salary of $125 through the year that they're paid every 2 weeks, but the vast majority of their money comes in that one bonus check.
Okay. Now, you mentioned there was a salary. Looking back at June of 2021, what were the partners in the law firm, what were they getting as a salary?
$125,000 a year,
All right, 125,000, and that was broken up into checks like people are
26
used
times
to.
a year, yes.
Okay. And then, so that has to be accounted for before the bonuses are paid, correct?
That's correct.
Salaries not only for the partners, but also for all the other employees.
That's correct, all staff.
All right, and is there other overhead that has to be accounted for out of the fees before that bonus can be paid?
Yes, all the other overhead is the basic operating expenditures like I discussed, rent for the building, insurance coverage for the employees, office supplies, case costs that we advance for our clients. We pay things as we go during the case. We pay experts, record fees. All of that is part of overhead. So after everything that's paid, everything brought in, after everything that's paid out is what we call that net income that we distribute.
Is there some sort of 7.5% fund or offset that has to be accounted for as well before the bonus is paid?
There is. We have what we call a 7.5% kind of profit sharing, and everybody takes their gross fees less their portion of overhead. We take overhead and divide it by the number of partners. And so you would take, let's just going to use numbers. If your gross fees were $100,000 and your overhead was $50,000, you have a net of $50,000. And we take 7.5% of that and put it in a pot and divide it back evenly in between everybody. And that purpose is meant to cover when somebody has a high year or a low year. It kind of helps people out and it helps account for differences in expenses between each attorney.
So all of that has to be taken care of before the bonus is paid out to the partners at the end of the year, is that correct?
That's correct.
And then whatever money is left over is divided up based on the percentage of the fees that that particular partner brought in of the whole for the year, is that
That's
correct?
correct.
So if you had a better year, you're going to get a little bit more than somebody who didn't have as good a year.
Absolutely.
Okay. Over time, being the CFO, did Alex Murdaugh have a very lucrative practice?
He did.
Were there times where his bonus was high six figures?
Definitely.
Were there times his bonus was seven figures?
There has been. And
was it typical for the vast majority of his compensation to be in that one-time bonus at the end of the year as opposed to the $125,000 salary?
Yes, his and everybody else's. That
$125,000 salary for these individuals was a fairly small part of the compensation.
Correct.
Now, one of the things that you mentioned is that at the very beginning, as you said, all fees belong to the firm. Is that right?
That is right.
And I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 310 to your testimony real quick and see if you can recognize this particular document.
I do. This is the employment agreement that each of the attorneys in the firm sign.
All right. Take that back real quick. Can I have the Elmo, please? I would offer 310 at this time of evidence.
No additional objections, Your Honor.
It's admitted.
Let me let this Elmo boot up real quick. Let's try it again. All right. So is this Exhibit 310, is this the first page of that agreement?
Yes.
All right, and on your little screen up there, can you read that all right?
Yes.
Okay. If we look at talking about employer and employees, now we've been talking about the law firm partners, but in the agreement, what are they referred to as?
They're actually shareholders, so we refer to them as partners in the fact that they all work together and support each other. But because of the type of tax entity we are, they're shareholders. It's just a legal and accounting determination. But in fact, you'll see them referred to as shareholders.
All right, but in this agreement, they're called employees, correct?
That's correct.
Now, just real quick, you talked about paying out the bonus at the end of the year, and that's where the vast majority of compensation for the partners goes out. Is there a tax reason for that? Do y'all clear the books at the end of the year?
We do clear the books at the end of the year. We function as a C corporation, which means any money that's left in that C corporation would pay a tax to. So to avoid double taxation, we pass that money down to the partners to the best of our ability.
All right. And so do you try to zero out the books?
We do.
All right. And that's to avoid taxing on anything that remained in the firm accounts?
Correct.
So let me ask you this. If the firm essentially zeroes out the books by paying these bonuses to all the partners at the end of the year, how do you operate in the few, January and February where we're at now before fees start to come in? What money do you use to do that?
So typically, a group of partners will go in and loan money back to the firm to cover our first couple months of operating expenses. And as we recover money through the year, we'll pay them back and pay them off. So we're basically starting at almost a negative by borrowing that money.
All right, and so some of the partners will loan money to the firm to operate until there's enough fees that come in to generate enough money. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Do the partners have to do that, or is that something they can do if they want?
That's something that they can do if they want.
Was Alec one to ever do that?
Alec never did that.
He never did that. Okay. Before we go on back to this agreement, let me ask you a little bit. As far as the firm accounts, you mentioned there's an operating account, correct?
That's correct.
And then there's a client trust account, correct?
That's correct.
Trust account.
Trust account.
Tell me what the client trust account is, please.
So the trust account is a fiduciary account, meaning that we have the responsibility to maintain and safeguard that money. It's where the account, whenever a case settles, that the money that is paid from the insurance company or individual from the defendant is put into that client trust account. And that is also where the money is dispersed out to any clients or any lien holders or anything to do with that disbursement. And it's also where we collect our fees and expenses from.
And are there legal obligations and money in the client trust account to ensure that that money only goes to the legitimate places it's supposed to go?
That's correct.
And if the law firm wins the case, whether by settlement or by trial, any recovery they get, does it go in that trust account first before the law firm gets paid?
Everything does, yes.
Now, I'm going to go back to exhibit, the employment agreement, I believe is exhibit 310. And right here in line 3 right there, can you read that to the jury, please?
Services for the benefit of employer. All professional services rendered by the employee shall be rendered as an employee of the employer, and all proceeds and remuneration received therefore shall inure to the employer's benefit.
All right, and this is the agreement signed by all the partners, correct?
Correct.
And back in 2021, it was signed by Alex Murdaugh, correct?
Correct.
And all the years prior, correct?
Correct.
And what does that provision mean? Explain that again to the jury.
That means that any work they do providing legal services and any money earned by them belongs to the law firm, not the partner, to the law firm, and should run through the law firm's books
It
and
has to go through
accounts.
the law firm's books before it can.
Correct.
And then they have to wait till the end of the year for it to be accounted for after paying all the overhead and the salary and the 7.5 and all the rest of it.
That's correct.
If a law partner were to divert fees to himself personally and not send them to the law firm, what would that be?
Stealing?
Stealing. Okay. All right. Tell me a little bit, if you would, about the management structure of the law firm. How does it work? Just very quickly.
So each attorney, apparently, they all, I can't even speak. They all have equal authority and equal choice. But basically, we'll have a little committee each year that we can go to with day-to-day issues and make some basic decisions that are then gone on and voted by the whole firm. I report directly to each and every attorney. So I would handle day-to-day obligations within certain authorities, and if I had an issue, then I would go to this committee or somebody who is present, because a lot of times attorneys are out of the building traveling in hard, and it would kind of go up the rank from there.
Okay. Was Alec very involved in the actual management of the firm?
No.
Were other partners more involved in the management of the firm?
Yes.
Tell me, what was your observation of Alec as a lawyer in the office? What was your observations and characterization?
Alec kept different hours than a lot of the rest of us. He came in and he would work late. always loud, always busy, always in a rush. He had the gift of gab, but he always seemed last minute and hurried and frenetic.
Okay. Always last minute and frenetic?
Yes,
What about his cell phone use? How was he with the cell phone?
constantly on the phone.
Constantly on the phone. What were your observations of him as a lawyer?
I think Alec was successful more not from his work ethic, but from his ability to establish relationships and to manipulate people into settlements and clients into liking him. So he did it through the art of bullshit, basically.
That can be an art.
Mhm.
Did he, in your estimation, in your judgment, was he more of a technical type lawyer, or was he one that really understood how to use the emotion of a case?
He would use the emotion of a case and the emotion of his clients.
Did he understand the emotional value that the sympathies of a case could have?
I would,
He's asked her to testify as what he understands, what's in his mind. I object.
I sustain the objection.
With Alex, your observations of Alec as a lawyer, what skills did you see in how he was able to value a case?
I would think that he was able to read the client. And it seemed to, he always got higher settlements than it looks like they should appear, going back when we've reviewed everything. So I think that he used his personality more than technical skill. I think that, we look back and we see things that were manipulated and set up, and I believe he did that a lot with his clients as well.
You mentioned, did Alec get good results? Did the defendant get good results?
It appeared that they usually did, yes.
Were they very lucrative results?
Yes.
Did you have any observations in working with Alec for 20-some odd years about his memory?
I think that looking back, where I thought he was chaotic and didn't remember things or kind of got bored with details sometimes and wouldn't finish things off, I really think looking back, as we've gone back and pieced together a lot of this, that we saw where he would tell people one thing and another person another. So in my opinion, looking back, I think he had almost a photographic memory, to keep all the balls in the air that we now saw were in the air. It appears that he would have to have a really strong memory.
Stand by for me real quick. You had mentioned before that for the firm to operate at the beginning of the year after it cleared its books, that it would loan from or take loans from partners at their option in order to sort of give some seed money until fees started to roll in. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 428 to your testimony, and just have you take a look at that and ask if you recognize those documents as it relates to a particular instance involving the defendant.
I do.
All right, and tell me about this instance. What happened here, please?
Okay, so this is in 2017. A check for the payment got mistakenly written to R. Alexander Murdaugh instead of his brother Randolph Murdaugh. So the loan payoff was written to Alec.
All right, let me slow you down. So does his brother work for the law firm?
His brother does work for the law firm.
And what name does he go by?
He goes by Randy Murdaugh. His legal name is Randolph Murdaugh IV.
Had Randy Murdaugh loaned money to the law firm?
He did.
Had Alec Murdaugh loaned all?
No.
All right, and so what happened then?
So, as we said, we had the clerical error, and a few days later, Alec came to our staff, and it's not quite clear which staff because our records don't show that, but a voided check, he acted as if he'd lost this original check and had another check written. So a replacement check was then written to Alec again, which was a mistake again.
Did that second check get cashed?
The second check got cashed pretty much immediately within a week or two. And then about a year later, the first check got cashed as well. And that's when I caught in the system that he had cashed both checks. And looking back, I realized that the mistake had been made, that somebody had hit, their names are right beside each other in the vendor list, and that they had made a clerical mistake, and that he was paid money that he was not owed.
All right. Ultimately, did he get that money twice that he was not supposed to have received?
He did,
And ultimately, was it because he claimed that he had lost the first check?
correct.
Ultimately, did he cash both checks?
He did,
And cash the original one a year later, is that
correct.
correct? All right. Was he confronted about this back at that time when it was detected, I guess, in 2017? Is that right?
He was.
And he was confronted at that time?
He was not, I don't remember that he was confronted by me. I know that Danny Henderson spoke with him about it, and Alec just claimed that he made a mistake and thought that he had paid the money, that he had loaned the money that year, and Danny chose to kind of let it go and sweep it under the rug.
Did he pay it back at that point?
He did pay it back.
All right, so that happened, and the explanation was given, and then he was allowed to pay it back. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And everybody moved on, right?
That's correct. I have to point out that it was, these attorneys worked as a brotherhood and were very family, and they trusted him and accepted this the explanation.
What was that word you just used? You said it was a brotherhood?
Yes.
And so when the attorneys are dealing with one another, when the attorneys are dealing with you, how are y'all dealing with one another? What's the basis of that?
Trust.
Trust?
Trust.
And so over the years, when Alex Murdaugh would tell you to do a transaction or anything like that, what were you relying on?
His word and trust.
Are you generally familiar with what's been known as the boat case?
Yes,
All right. And do you remember that occurring around in February 2019?
I do.
All right. And again, without going into the specifics of the boat case, what was your general understanding of the boat case? Well, let me ask you this. Was his son Paul charged with driving the boat in the boat case, to your knowledge?
Yes.
And was Alex Murdaugh sued civilly in the boat case because of the death of Mallory Beach?
Yes.
After the boat case, did you notice any changes in Alex's behavior or his demeanor around the office?
I can't say that I really did up until November, December of late 20.
Okay, and what'd you notice then?
Didn't really notice it then, and we can go back and notice it now. That's when he started making some disbursements that he was stealing from that started getting sloppy. So the things that I noticed are more in hindsight.
And I put this exhibit up on the screen. Let me get ahead of myself. This is exhibit 428, which I'd offer in evidence.
No additional objection, Chairman.
All right.
So admit it without objection.
428. This is this is the loan check you were talking about. Is that right?
That's right.
This is where Alec erroneously received a check meant for his brother Randy,
That's right.
and then ultimately managed to get the same amount twice. Is that correct?
That's right.
All right. And how much is that check for? I can bring it to you if you need to see it.
Yeah, you're gonna have to.
Yeah, I'll bring it to you. Screen over here is bigger than that one.
It was for $121,358.63.
$121,000, correct?
That's correct.
When you received the check, did Alex say, no, this isn't my $121,000 check?
No, he didn't.
Now, you mentioned, you started to talk about some things you noticed in late of 2020, and let's just set the table a little bit more before we do that. You mentioned disbursements. Tell the jury, before we see some paperwork, tell the jury how disbursements go about. Is there certain paperwork that's done, and how do the lawyers interface with the finance stuff for that to be accomplished?
Okay, so a disbursement after a case is won, or what we call settled, the money comes into the client trust, just like I talked about. A disbursement will recap how much money was won, how much attorney fees, how much expenses were withheld or earned for our firm in that, and then it will list any loans or liens that need to be paid off. And what I mean by that is like medical liens, medical bills, insurance companies getting their money back for items that they paid, and then it will show the balance that goes to the client.
And so then how do they interface with the finance staff? What does the finance staff do as opposed to when the attorneys prepare those disbursement forms?
It comes over to our finance department. We have the supporting documentation with it, and we will process the checks based off the attorney's signature. Those then go back to the attorneys that handled the case or the paralegals that handled the case. They meet with the client and explain the disbursement to them and give them the funds.
Is the finance staff relying on what the lawyers are sending them to determine what checks should be cut?
Yes,
All right.
with support.
With support.
Yes.
Ultimately, are they trusting the attorneys to provide them the correct information?
We are.
All right, so you mentioned that something that happened in late 2020 that was the first things that you started to notice in the wake of the Bowden case that was a little different. And tell the jury what you were about to talk about.
As I said, in late 2020, I really didn't notice it at that point. But some of these items that we're going to discuss started happening at that point. My discovery of things started coming to a head in May of 21.
In May of 2021.
Yes.
All right, and tell me what was the first thing that came to your attention?
Because so one thing that came to attention was a disbursement that the fees were made out and processed to Forge Consulting. And what that meant is that the fees weren't going into our personal account like they should. They weren't going to the firm. Forge Consulting is a true company that you can do structures of attorney fees, but the way that this was done was not correct. To do a correct structure,
Let me slow you down so we can unpack this a little
Okay.
bit. All right. Let's first talk about what is a structure. What is a structure? What does that mean?
So a structure means that you can set up a fee in the agreement with the insurance company that you can put that money into an annuity that you'll get it out later. You can avoid taxes now and take them out when you're 65 or whatever year you determine. So it's a way that they can defer income for retirement. If they're having a good year, they can do that.
So maybe an explanation would be kind of like the lottery. You can either get your settlement in one lump sum or you can get it paid over time, correct?
Correct.
All right. And so this is what a structure is getting it paid over time.
Correct.
And are there tax benefits associated with doing a structure?
They would avoid taxes at the year that they made the fee, and they would pay the taxes when they got it out, similar to your retirement 401k.
And is it sometimes common for plaintiffs' lawyers who get recoveries for clients, to have their clients get the settlement in a structure as opposed to getting it in all one lump sum so that there's some security over time with that money?
It is definitely a vehicle that can be used by plaintiffs' lawyers. We don't do it very often in our firm, and when it is done, it has to be, every partner needs to know about it and needs to be agreed upon, because obviously that money's not coming into the firm to help with overhead and expenses. So we have to agree on it, and we have to account for it in our allocations at the end of the year to determine bonuses that we're going to pay out.
Sure, but I'm talking about with clients right now. So clients that receive a settlement, they can
Okay.
elect to either get it in one lump sum, or they can get a structured annuity over time, where they get it however much a year for the however many years it goes, correct?
Yes, that's true too.
Kind of like the lottery, you can get the whole big thing, but with taxes, or you can get a bigger sum over time, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And so some clients might choose to get it over time so that their money is more secure over a longer time, correct?
Correct, and you generally see that when it's a minor involved or somebody with special needs that has a disability of some sort.
And so what is Forge Consulting, the legitimate business Forge Consulting? What do they do?
They set up structured annuities for clients like we're talking about. They do special needs trusts for people who are injured or are going to need life care plans, and they handle that kind of, they have a few other things that they do, but I'm not familiar as much with those services.
Have they provided services over the years, the legitimate company, Forge Consulting, legitimate services to the law firm and its clients over the years in helping them set up structured settlements?
They do. We've used them 250 to 300 times.
And who's kind of like the main guy at Forge Consulting, the legitimate business?
Michael Gunn.
All right. Now, you mentioned that we're not talking now about the client structuring their settlements, but what if a lawyer wins a big case and wants to, so he's going to get a huge fee. And let me ask you this first. Generally, what is the legal fees for the firm when they win a case, whether by settlement or by trial?
Generally, they're 33% to 40%, and it depends on what stage the case was in or the work we had to do. So if we settle a case before we have to start doing summons and complaints and depositions or going to trial, we take 33 1/3%. If it goes further, we do 40%, and it can go to 45% if it's on an appeal. But generally speaking, it's between 1/3 and 40%.
So let's say that somebody's a partner, and let's say they win a case of $10 million, and it was a 40% one, so they're going to get a $4 million fee, correct?
Correct.
All right, let's say that they decided that instead of taking that fee, that $4 million fee, they want to structure that fee just like a client would. Can they do that?
They can do that, and that's what I was referring to before, with the authorization of the other partners and making sure that we have enough money to operate and enough money to account for it. If they do that, it's supposed to be done in the release, and the insurance company will send the money directly to Forge Consulting and not through us.
Okay. Because it can't go through y'all directly or it doesn't work. Is that
Or he
correct?
would not get the tax benefit of it.
And if an attorney still had to do that, they're going to have to work everything out with y'all to make sure everything's accounted for the end of the year bonuses and everything else.
That's correct.
Is that a common thing that people in the firm were doing?
No.
All right. So, kind of setting all that up, did you, what came to your attention as it related to the defendant, Alex Murdaugh?
So in May 17, there was a disbursement called Hirschberger that the fees were said I would have to look at the exact disbursement, but it said structured fees, Forge, and it had an amount.
Let me get something marked real quick.
Yep.
All right, I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 429 to your testimony, and have you just flip through that real quick and tell me generally what that is.
Okay, this is the disbursements to do with the money recovered in the Hirschberger case. And this one had multiple disbursements.
All right, but let's just talk about the one you were just referring to.
Okay.
I'll show it to you.
It's this page.
On the third page of this exhibit, is that right?
That's right.
All right, pick up your story. What did you notice that came to your attention?
So it says PMPED attorney fee, and in parentheses it had Forge. The check had been made out payable to Forge, and I knew this was incorrect, so I went and had a discussion with Alec about this. And the basics of the discussion was we needed to know about if they were going to do a structured annuity, we needed to do it. I also told him that the way he had done it was incorrect, that he would not be saving any tax consequences, that he needed to properly set it up with the insurance company on the front side.
Right. And why wasn't it done right? Why were you telling, at least from what you knew at the time, why did you think it was not being done right?
Basically because it should have gone from the insurance company directly to Forge. We would not write a check and send it to Forge for a structured fee.
Let me put this up on the screen just real quick.
Yeah, no other objection to 429.
All right, and this time I move states 429 into evidence, I believe, without additional objection.
Submit.
All right. So is this the disbursement sheet you were talking about?
Yes, sir.
And this is generally the first one the jury's seen, but is this generally how disbursement sheets look that are prepared by the law firm?
Yes, you generally see the caption and then our inside number, which is the matter ID. You'll see the recovery and who's paid out. Then the next section should be your fee and expenses.
All right, so you've got the fee right there, correct?
That's correct.
And then you have expenses, and what are expenses?
So the expenses are the case costs that we paid going along, cost to get depositions and pay transcribers, medical records, expert opinions. Sometimes vehicles are involved that we store. So it's anything that we pay on behalf of that case.
All right, and so they'll have to come out of the recovery too, correct?
That's correct.
And that's separate from the attorney's fees, right?
Correct.
All right, so when y'all settle a case, you're going to get your attorney's fees, but you're also going to get paid back any costs and expenses you had to litigate the case.
That's correct.
Two separate amounts.
Correct.
All right, and then we've got a lien. Explain to me what a lien is and how those affect disbursements if you go through.
So a lien is, it could be as simple as paying a doctor's bill that was guaranteed, or it can be paying back subrogation, which means subrogation just means if you had insurance that covered it personally, your Blue Cross Blue Shield, and we recovered money, Blue Cross Blue Shield or Medicare and Medicaid, if you had that, would then be seeking their money back. So that would be a lien.
Sometimes somebody who got injured, like in a car wreck or something, might have medical bills, and there's a lien for that.
Yes,
And sometimes funds might be withheld to satisfy those medical bills.
that's correct too.
Is it common for the law firm to then negotiate with the medical provider, like a hospital or whatever, and see if we can get that medical bill down to a number they'll settle for?
That is correct.
And then if you save any money between what their bill was and what you get them to accept, is that additional money that should go back to the client?
That's right.
And are those very common in these types of cases?
Yes, and generally, we will not hold up dispersing the money to the client, waiting on that to happen, because it can take a while. So we may have a disbursement that leaves some money in our account, the balance of those bills while we're negotiating them, and then we'll do a second disbursement to pay those clients that money or the provider the money.
All right, so you pay them the big amount first, and then if you're lucky enough to settle for a lesser amount, then whatever's left over, you'll send to them later.
Correct.
All right, so then down here we have then the ultimate disbursement to the beneficiaries, the clients, is that correct?
That's right.
All right.
And
then
if
you're
there's
supposed to-
multiple, as this one, you would see the split between the two.
All right, and just real quick, whose signature is that right there?
That is Alex,
And have you worked with him for how long, or did work with him for?
23 years, 22 years.
All right, and so you got very familiar with his signature?
Yes,
You recognize that as his signature?
yes.
All right, going back here to this disbursement, we had PMP attorney's fee Forge, and then you had that amount. And And then what is this next page of this exhibit?
That's the canceled check payable to Forge for $83,333.33.
All right, and you recognize that signature on there?
That's Alex.
Okay. And so when we last left off, you were telling Alec that it had been done wrong because it had gone straight from the trust account direct to what you believed to be Forge at the time, correct?
Correct.
And it can't go to the law firm or the tax benefits go away.
That's right.
All right. So you raised those issues with Alec. What was his response when you first talked to him about this?
His response was that he was not worried so much about the tax ramifications and saving the taxes, but that he was trying to get money in Maggie's name due to the boat accident that had happened in February of 2019.
All right. Go ahead.
He also brought up the fact that he was friends with Michael Gunn and that was going to try to work with Michael Gunn, putting up some fees during the year as a favor to Michael Gunn and to help him accomplish putting money in Maggie's name.
Did he say anything, and I apologize if you already said this, did he say anything in response to your pointing out that this isn't going to work for the tax benefit?
He said that's fine. He was not worried about the tax benefit so much as getting the money in Maggie's name.
Because of what?
The boat wreck.
Because of the boat wreck. All right. Did that concern you at all?
Yes, it did.
And why did it concern you?
Because that is hiding assets, and we're not going to be part of any hiding assets or any wrongdoing. So we were very concerned that he was trying to do that, and we didn't want to be a part of it.
At that point in time, did you do anything about it, or did you kind of table the matter for the time being?
We kind of tabled the matter for the time being. I had it kind of set aside, trying to figure out how am I going to account for this in my books, and we were going to go back and talk to partners and kind of figure out what we were going to do.
Ultimately, when is the sort of the drop-dead deadline that you have to account for everything in the books?
Usually I will do our final closing. I balance all the time, but usually we'll do that final accounting in December. So I really start drilling down and looking at everything and balancing out in December. But I knew I had till December to figure this out. And at that point, I was more concerned about how we were going to put it on our books and also letting the partners know what was going on so we could make sure that it was disclosed to his attorneys with the boat wreck stuff.
Just kind of just put that aside, but keep it in the back of your mind?
Right.
This is in May of what year did this happen?
21.
All right. Later on that month, did you receive a communication of any sort from Alex Paralegal?
I did on Monday.
Who was that, real quick?
That is Annette Griswold.
All right.
And she's one of his paralegals.
And what communication did she have with you?
So I received an email. I was working in our Waldoboro office that day, and I received an email from Annette that said she needed to talk to me in private, and could I please meet with her when I got back in the office. So when I did get back in the office, we met, and she came to me with another concern in another file that we had.
All right. And tell me what file was that?
So this file we referred to it as the Ferris file. And it was a case with Ferris versus Mack Truck that had a fairly significant settlement. And the concern was that we had only received the expenses. When on this, let me first say, this case was handled by Chris Wilson's firm, and they were handling the disbursement. All the money went through their account, and they drafted the disbursement and met with the client. So if that happens, typically the associate attorney will mail us our fee check and our expense check at the same time.
Let me slow you down. So this particular case, the Ferris case, was Alex Murdaugh the only attorney on that case?
In our firm, I believe he was, but Chris Wilson was the associated attorney.
Is Chris Wilson in PMPE, or is he in a different firm?
No, he's in his own different firm.
And does that happen sometimes that two lawyers, one lawyer from your firm and one lawyer from another firm will share a case?
Yes, we have quite a lot of that.
All right. And then ultimately those fees have to be split whichever way they agreed to do that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then sometimes if the settlement money or the trial money comes into that other firm, then they have to disperse the fees and expenses to you.
That's correct.
And tell the jury again, what was Annette's concern? Did she receive part of it but not the other thing?
Annette received only a check for the expenses,
But not the fees?
not the fee, which is unusual. So she had already, unbeknownst to me, contacted my staff to make sure that we had not received that fee prior. And indeed, we checked and it had not been. So the conversation Annette had with me that day was her concern that we were missing the fee check. And she'd had some conversations with Vicki Lyman, who is Chris Wilson's paralegal. And that led Annette to believe that Alec had already had the money paid to him.
And that's the concern that she reported to you?
Yes.
All right, hold on for me, and I'm going to show you what's been marked as States 312. Give me 1 second. Your Honor, I believe States 312 is offered for admission with no additional objection.
That's correct, Your Honor.
Submit it.
All right, I'm going to show you this packet of documents. I'm going to go to some emails that are within it. And first of all, I'm going to show you this one right here and just see if you recognize that, please.
I do.
All right, tell me what that is.
This is an email from Vicki Lyman, who's the paralegal for Chris Wilson, to Annette Griswold, who's the paralegal for Alex Murdaugh. And in it, Annette's questioning, why did we get the expenses and no fee? Vicki replied back, dear friend, it's only cost because your boss and mine got their fees once they were signed.
All right, so that's why Annette brought that concern to you.
Yes.
All right. Did you have any conversation with Annette about what to do?
Well, Annette expressed concern about tattling on Alec and perhaps getting in trouble for him or retaliation from him. So I told her.
What's the concern? What's the concern right now?
The concern is,
I just asked her what her concern was, Your Honor.
the concern was that that money had been stolen.
If there's an objection, wait. Yes, sir.
He's asking her what Annette's concern was, and Annette needs to testify about her own concern.
All right, sir. You state the question, please.
I'll restate the question. What was your concern?
My concern was that he had stolen the fees and they were paid to him personally.
All right. Did you, in this conversation with Annette, did you instruct her to do anything? Did you send any email?
I sent an email to Annette asking for Annette to get copies of the complete disbursement from Chris Wilson's office, along with a copy of what we call the general ledger printout, which would show the deposit and the checks, and the supporting document to the disbursement. Oftentimes, we'll just get a copy of the disbursement. So I asked for the full records like we would have in our office.
And what did you tell Annette to do once you sent that email to her?
Annette forwarded that email to Vicki Lyman at Chris Wilson's office.
All right. And I'm going to show you what's been, was part of Exhibit 312, and it's marked as 2374 at the bottom. And just kind of read that email going up. Is that the email that you sent to Annette?
Yes.
And is that the one that you were asking her to forward on?
Yes.
To request additional information from Chris Wilson's office to try to get to the bottom of it?
Yes.
All right. And if we go to the prior page, Is that where Annette forwarded that document on to Vicki Lyman at Chris Wilson's office?
This is.
All right. All right, and just real quick, what was the date on that email when it was ultimately forwarded to Vicki Lyman at Chris Wilson's office?
That email was sent on May 27th, but Vicki was out of the office on vacation, so Vicki replied to Annette on June 2nd upon her return.
Okay, and what was the reply?
And the reply was just clarifying what documents that they needed. And at that point, Vicki replies back to Annette that she's not privy to that information, but she'll forward it on to Chris Wilson.
To her boss, Chris Wilson.
Yes.
All right, so have y'all gotten an answer at this point?
No.
All right, so what's the next step? What happens after that?
So we're waiting for a while, and on Monday, May 7th, I went to Alex's office searching for him after lunch.
Real quick. After you sent this email on June 2nd, did Alec ever reach out to you or talk to you about the inquiries that you were making about where these fees were?
Yes, he actually came in the next day. First thing, Chris did not answer me, but Alec came in the first thing and said, that money's in Chris's trust. Why do you need all this information? And I basically said, we just need it for our records. It's what we have in ours, and it's required for us to keep. He assured me that the money was over there and that he'd get the records, and they would get everything that we needed.
All right, and that was some point after June 2nd?
I believe it was the next morning.
All right, and did you seek him out, or did he seek you out to say, hey, no, that money's there the whole time?
He seeked me out.
All right, and that's what he told you?
Yes.
All right, around this time, did anybody else, did you have any discussions with any of the other partners about what was going on with this?
I did. I'd initially gone to Lee Cope because he's one of the partners that does a lot of the managing, and he happened to be the one that was in the office when this was going on that I could find and talk to. And he also helped me come up with the plan of how we were going to handle it so Alec would not think Annette was questioning. Mark Ball also knew some about it, so.
All right. Was there any discussion about anyone contacting Chris Wilson?
After we didn't get it, that came later.
That came later?
That came later.
Okay. All right. So Alec comes to you and says all that money's there. What's the next thing that happened that you did?
So the next thing that happened was on Monday, on June 7th, I went looking for Alec.
Let me slow you down. On Monday, June 7th?
Yes.
What year?
21.
June 7th, 2021. What happened?
Went to look for Alec, and when I got upstairs, he was standing outside of his office leaning on a file cabinet, and he looked at me with a pretty dirty look, one I'd not seen before, and said, "What do you need now?" Clearly disgusted with me, which kind of raised my hackles. So I said, well, let's go in your office and talk about it. When we went in his office, I told him, I have reason to believe that you received the fairest money directly to you, and you need to prove to me that you did not. And he assured me again that the money was in there. I told him I still needed to see the ledgers or proof that it was. Again, he told me the money was in there, that we could get it any time. Said he was trying to leave it in there to decide what to do as far as structuring some more money or putting more money in Maggie's name.
You asked him for proof, is that correct?
Yes.
Proof that he didn't have that money?
Yes.
Were you able to complete that conversation on the morning of June 7th, 2021?
It was actually the afternoon of June 7th.
Afternoon.
But no, we were not able to complete it. During the middle of our conversation, he took a phone call, and the call was saying that his father was in the hospital and that there was nothing more that could be done, and he was terminal. So at that point, I've known Alec since I was 16 years old, known the family forever. It turned into a personal conversation about how's your dad doing, how's everything doing, what's going on. And I basically thought he was leaving to go to the hospital to attend to his father, so I left the office at that time, and we did not discuss the money anymore.
You thought he was leaving to go?
I thought he was going to go to see about his father.
He had gotten a phone call about his father June 7th, 2021, correct?
That's right.
Did you have a conversation with Alec later on that day?
We did. Around 4 o'clock, my phone rang, and I remember because I was surprised that he was still there. And Alec was asking me some information about his 401k balance.
And why was he doing that?
He was doing that because he stated he had to get some documents and financials together for a hearing regarding the boat wreck later that week.
He needed his own financial information for a hearing for the boat case that week, correct?
That's correct.
Do you know when the boat case was? The boat case hearing
I
was?
believe it was June 10th,
June 10th?
21, within a few days.
Within a few days. Were you surprised to hear from him in the office?
I was, because I thought he was leaving.
Thought he was leaving because of the call from about his father.
His father.
Did you go home at the end of work that day?
I did,
Went back home and had a normal evening?
yes, until about 10:30.
Tell me what happened at 10:30.
I got a call or started getting texts from friends asking if I'd heard if Maggie and Paul had been shot. I didn't know anything about it. They were hearing things on scanners. So I've sent texts to a couple of the attorneys and did not hear back until probably 2 o'clock in the night. Mark emailed me back or texted me back that they in fact had been shot and killed.
Was that shocking?
It was very shocking,
Was everybody scared?
very scary. You know, nobody knew what was going on, so very scary.
You said this law firm is like a brotherhood, correct?
That's correct.
Did everyone rally to Alex aid?
We did. Nothing happened that week at work. Everybody spent time with Alec, trying to support him, bringing family meals, attending the funerals, so nothing happened all week.
After the murders happened, was anybody at all concerned about getting the proof for those missing fees after those murders happened at that point in time?
We weren't, because we were concerned about Alec. He wasn't working a whole lot. He was erratic. We knew he was taking pills. We were just worried about his sanity, so we weren't going to go in there and harass him about money when we were worried about his mental state and the fact that his family had been killed. It just wasn't even on our mind at that point.
Wouldn't be on your mind, would it?
No.
As a few weeks went on, did you ever receive any communication about those fees that kind of put the matter to bed at least a little bit?
We did. Lee Cope, who is one of the partners, took over. We decided we were not going to press Alec, but Lee made some contact with Chris Wilson during that time, asking Chris for information. And I believe after that, Alec searched me out again and said, "Hey, I've got that money." But it wasn't until, I believe it was July 19th, I received an email that Chris had forwarded to Alec. Alec then forwarded the email to myself and Lee Cope. And in that email, it said, "I am holding the fees for the Ferris case," and he named the amounts and said they are available anytime that you should need them. So we're being told by outside counsel that the money is there.
Did you trust what you were being told?
Yes.
When you got that email, did at least for the time being, that look like the matter was put to bed?
Yes, I mean, these are members of the bar who've taken a sworn oath that we're supposed to trust, and they're telling us the money's there.
I'm still in Exhibit 312. I'm going to put this up on the screen. Do you recognize that?
That is the email that I'm referring to.
And this email comes from who to who?
Comes from Chris Wilson to Alex Murdaugh,
And then it gets sent to who?
myself and Lee Cope,
From who?
from Alex Murdaugh.
All right. And can you read to the jury that paragraph right there? What was forwarded to you to sort of put this matter to bed?
Alex, as discussed, I am confirming that I am holding in trust $600,000 in the Andrell Ferris case and $192,000 in the Denise Ferris case, which represent attorney fees. I will continue to hold these monies in trust until I'm instructed by you and your firm regarding payment.
Does that leave you to believe that those monies have been there all along?
Yes, with some hesitation on my part, because it still seemed a little shaky to me. But I've decided that I would have to believe what was presented to me.
And this, what's the date on this particular email?
July 19th
So we're just
of
over
2021.
just over a month after murders, is that correct?
Yes, a little over.
I take you forward a little bit. Well, let me ask you this. In that time period in July and August, going into early September, is Alec in the office much?
He's not in the office very much, no.
Now you had mentioned before the first thing that kind of came to your attention, and what case was that?
Hirschberger and Ferris.
All right. At some point in time, does that Hirschberger matter kind of come back to your attention to take a look at that?
Yes, like I said, I had it sitting there on my desktop right in front of me. But due to work and personal obligations and things that were happening that summer, I didn't start looking again until September. And decided to start combing through his fees for the year and just making sure that we had not missed anything else.
Before you go on with that, around that same time as you're doing that, does Annette Griswold come into your office?
She did. Incidentally, during the day, after I'd found what I'm about to discuss with you, she walks into the office and had found a check on Alex's desk that was made payable to Richard Alexander Murdaugh, and it was from Chris Wilson's trust account, and the amount, I believe, was $225,000, and it was signed and on the memo, Ferris fees.
All right. I'm going to show you what's been marked as States 313. See if you recognize that.
That's the check I'm just discussing.
All right. Your Honor, this time I would move States 313 into evidence.
No additional objection.
Admit it.
And what is States 313?
That is a check from Chris Wilson's client trust account payable to Richard Alexander Murdaugh Esquire in the amount of $225,000 referencing Ferris fees.
Is it made out to the law firm?
No.
Who's it made out to?
It's made out to him personally, Richard Alexander Murdaugh.
When you see this check, what, if anything, is your realization?
That he stole the money, that he'd been lying.
And what's the date on that check?
March 10th, 2021.
All right. So, and that brings you that check, and you're also looking at the forward. You said, explain what you were doing as well when this is going on.
So simultaneously that day, I decided to print out a listing of forged payments to Forge Consulting. And as I was printing those out, I was printing supporting documents and canceled checks. And as the canceled checks hit the back of my printer, I could see Alex Murdaugh's signature on the back. It would say Alex Murdaugh, and a lot of them were Bank of America. And as everyone come out, I started noticing it more and more, and I just, the sickest feeling you could feel in the world. I knew that he was stealing all this money. At that point, William Barnes just happened to call over to my office and said, "What are you doing? How are you doing today?" And I said, "I'm about to throw up. You need to come over here." And showed him the checks, at which point he verified that he thought that was Alex's signature as well. From there, we called Mark Ball. Mark Ball came and looked over the information. We showed him the proof of the check of the $225,000, and Mark noticed that one of the cases that he definitely knew it could not have been going to forge because it was a workers' comp case.
Which case was that?
That was Thomas Moore.
Okay, keep going.
So he knew that that money couldn't have been sent no matter what. We also discussed this with Lee Cope, and we were trying to decide how are we going to handle this, what are we going to do. Lee Cope, it was decided that Lee Cope would contact Michael Gunn directly, and we named a few of the cases, we got a few of the names. Lee contacted Michael Gunn, asked him if there'd ever been, to please verify if there'd ever been any structures with that, and also asked Michael Gunn if they'd been banking at Bank of America. Michael's reply to Lee was that they had not banked at Bank of America in a number of years, and that he was unable to verify that those were indeed set structured fees for those clients.
All right, so let me slow you down real quick. You researched what name in there?
Forge Consulting.
So you're researching in your system Forge Consulting, correct?
Yes.
To see any instances where it was an Alex Murdaugh case that went to Forge Consulting, correct?
Correct.
And did you find a number of checks?
We did.
You have access to the firm trust account checks on your system.
Yes.
And when you saw those checks, what did you observe that caused that sickening feeling you just described?
They were made to Forge instead of Forge Consulting, but also the fact that his signature was on the back and the endorsement on the back was Bank of America.
And what did that indicate to you about all those checks when you saw his signature on them?
That they were stolen fees, stolen money.
That's different from this, correct?
That's correct.
What's being stolen? What, if anything, is being stolen with Exhibit 313?
The fee, the check is being written directly to Richard Alexander Murdaugh, and in the other scheme, it is written to a Forge account, which we realized was a Forge bank account. We found in the office a few days later bank statements that said Richard Alexander Murdaugh doing business as Forge.
All right, so you say a few days later in Alex's office you found some bank statements.
That's correct.
Do you remember what bank they were on?
Bank of America.
And I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 335 and see if you recognize that just as an example.
I do.
And what is that?
This is a bank statement from Bank of America with the name Richard A. Murdaugh, sole prop, which means proprietor, doing business as Forge, and it has Alex's home address as the contact on the bank account.
And you found bank statements on this account in his office, correct?
That's right.
Is this the legitimate Forge bank account?
It's the fake Forge bank account.
Your Honor, we don't have any additional objections.
I would offer a 335, Your Honor, at this time. Is that the name that was on the account that you found?
Yes.
And you called it, quote, fake forge.
Fake Forge,
And why do you call it fake forge?
because there is a real Forge Consulting, but this was a fake company that he set up to mimic and look like, and designed to look like Forge.
The real forge, who's the main guy at the real forge?
Michael Gunn.
And does this account right here in Alex Murdaugh's name have anything to do with the real forge?
Absolutely none.
Going back to Exhibit 313, this check, the problem is, who should have this check been made out to?
That should have been made out to Peters, Murdoch, Parker, Elsdroth, and Dietrich.
To the law firm, correct?
That's right.
All right, so who is not getting what they're supposed to get in this instance for this check?
The law firm.
When we start talking about the fake forge account, who's generally not getting what they're supposed to get? Is it the law firm or someone else?
Generally the client, sometimes the law firm, but generally the client.
Generally the clients. All right. Show you what's been marked as States 314. See if you recognize this.
Yes, this is a spreadsheet of all the payments made to the fake forge, referencing each client and the amount that was stolen from each client.
And did you prepare that?
I did.
All right. And is this based on an investigation that you had to do in the wake of all of this?
Yes, we did. We also had forensic auditors come in and look at this. We hired former FBI to come in and look at this, and we've also self-reported to the Office of Disciplinary Counsel, which maintains licenses, and we've turned over 10 years of information to them at least, and provided them with all this.
Let me see it real quick. Your Honor, at this time we would move into evidence States 314.
Your Honor, we do not have any additional objections, provided we understand that it's being offered for the limited purpose for which Your Honor instructed the jury yesterday, that it's not character evidence, it's only the motive, according to the state's theory.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. All right. We're going to pick up on your story in a little bit, but you were saying that when Annette Griswold, around the time she brought you that Chris Wilson check that had Alex's name on it, you also were bringing up and searching forge in your system, and that's when you saw all these, quote, fake forge checks, correct?
That's correct.
And you mentioned that you went and talked to some partners about it and that sort of thing, correct?
That's correct.
All right, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, but just real quick, as we go to Exhibit 314, this is that spreadsheet that you prepared, is that correct?
That's correct.
And we have what's this right here?
That is the date of the check where the funds were stolen from.
All right, and then right here?
That's the client name.
All right, and then right here?
That's what we call the civil action number if it's been filed within the court.
All right, and then the category?
Is what type that he did. Most of them are forged payments, or you see a couple other took insurance, so he had a few methods.
All right, and then over here, is that when y'all had to pay the money back?
Yes, so for each one of these, the money that was stolen, all the partners got together and had to put the money back into client trust, and we went through and corrected and met with every client and distributed money back to them. That's an ongoing basis still going on.
So for all these clients, you had to pay, the law firm had to pay money back.
The partners came up with money and paid all the clients back
And why did y'all have to pay all that money back?
because Alec had stolen it.
We're going to talk about these in a minute, but if we look at the bottom, at least for this category, what was the total that you have, at least for this category?
$2,841,512.55.
And at least in this category, the earliest date we have is roughly what year?
2015.
All right, let's go back to early September. Do you remember what day it was that all this was happening?
September 2nd.
All right, and that brings you this check. You're finding these things. You say you talked to some of the partners about this.
Correct.
And what happens after that? What do y'all do?
We had a partner meeting at Lee Cope's house the morning of Friday, September 3rd.
Is the defendant there?
No.
All right. Is Randy Murdaugh there?
Randy is not there initially.
Okay.
Initially, we showed all the remaining partners what we had found and that he had been stealing. The consensus was, let's get Randy in here and let's show him, so he wasn't blindsided. Randy came in, we presented him the evidence, and he immediately hung his head and said, he stole it, we've got to do something about this.
All right. And did anybody then go make contact with the defendant?
So Danny Henderson and Randy Murdaugh went to confront Alec about it.
And what was reported to you after that conversation?
The report was that Alec had admitted that he stole the money and that we were forcing him to resign.
In the wake of all of that, you ultimately had to start doing this review, is that correct?
Yes,
And this spreadsheet that we're about to go through reflects those various transactions, is that correct?
that's right.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a break now. If you'll go to the jury room, please do not discuss the case. Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Seckinger, before the break, just to reset the table, you had gone in, did you go into Alex's office on June 7th, 2021 for proof that he had not taken the Chris Wilson fees?
Yes,
And then that conversation got delayed, correct?
yes, got disrupted and delayed.
The murders happened.
Correct.
Did you receive an email in July leading you to believe that the Chris Wilson fees were in the account all along?
We did.
And then we moved to September when Annette Griswold, Alec's paralegal, did she bring you a check showing that in fact those checks had been written to Alec back in March of 2021?
That's correct.
And at the same time, you were going through the system and looking at payments to Forge, correct?
Correct.
And the real Forge is headed by who? Who's the main guy there?
Michael Gunn.
All right. And then ultimately, though, you determined these were going to what you called what?
Fake Forge.
Fake Forge, which was an account set up to look like Forge, but in the name of who?
Richard Alexander Murdaugh.
The defendant?
Yes.
And then once you uncovered that, that started to pull the thread into a series of things you're about to testify going back the preceding years. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so that's kind of where we left off?
That's right.
All right. We're going to go back and look at States 314, and we're just going to do these in order and move expeditiously as we can. What's been marked as States 317. So you're to this trial, and see if you recognize that.
I do. This is the disbursement statement for Adriana Hay.
All right, Your Honor, at this time the state would offer States 317 into evidence.
No additional objection, Your Honor.
Submitted.
All right, and tell the jury what this is very quickly.
So in this one, there's a recovery of $247,500. There's attorney fees of $22,000, expenses of $426.54, and then the settlement proceeds to Forge Consulting for the client's amount of $225,073.46.
Right, and that's the disbursement sheet that was signed by who? Do you recognize the signature on there?
Alex.
All right, and let me put it up on the screen. Was this record, was this found in the files of the law firm?
Yes.
And whose signature is that right there?
Alex,
What's the date on this?
12/20/2018.
And what's the first name of the client here, please?
Adriana.
All right. And we look at this, this particular disbursement, it's got the recovery amount, that's how much money came in, is that correct?
That's correct.
And then we have an attorney's fee,
Yes, and that looks like that's a reduced fee.
all right? It's a reduced fee in as much as not, why did you say it's a reduced fee?
It's not a third or either 40% of the $247,500.
All right, and then we've got expenses, is that correct?
Yes.
And then finally, we have this line right here. What does that say again?
Settlement proceeds to Forge Consulting, $225,000, $73.46.
Did that go to the real Forge consultant?
That went to the fake Forge Consulting.
And who controls the fake Forge account?
Alex Murdaugh.
Exhibits after they're in evidence.
All right. Is it any evidence? Not. This particular exhibit.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor. All right, and looking at the second page of this exhibit, what is this?
This is the check made payable to Forge for the $225,073.46.
And that went to the fake Forge?
Yes,
All right. Did the law firm ultimately have to pay that money back?
we did,
And why did you have to pay it back?
because Alex stole it.
Again, looking at these disbursement sheets, these are prepared by the attorneys and their staff, is that correct?
That's correct.
And then they're delivered to the finance staff?
Correct.
And then the finance staff uses that to do what?
To cut the checks and give them back to the attorney to disperse to the clients.
So this first sheet was delivered to your staff, is that correct?
Correct.
And then they did what?
They wrote the checks as per the disbursement.
And why did they do what Alex Murdaugh requested them to do?
They trusted him, and he was their boss, and that's what they thought they should do.
All right, going to the next one. States 318. I'll show you what's been marked as States 318. See if you recognize this document.
Yes, this is a disbursement statement for Barrett Boulware.
All right, Your Honor, at this time I would offer States 318 into evidence.
No additional objection, Your Honor.
Submitted.
All right, I'm gonna put it up on the screen. If you have problems seeing, just let me know and I'll bring it
Okay.
back to you, okay? All right, again, this is the disbursement statement for this particular case.
That's correct.
And who's the first name of the client, please?
Barrett,
All right. And looking here on this particular one, we have again a recovery, and then we have some expenses, and then ultimately we have this right here. Is that correct?
that's correct.
And who was that disbursement? What did it say on the disbursement sheet?
Forge, but that's the fake Forge.
All right. And do you see a signature on there?
I do, it's Alex Murdaugh's.
All right. And going to the next page, you recognize that?
This is the check payable for $279,850 and I believe 85 cents or 65 cents.
All right. And do you recognize that signature right there?
That's Alex Murdaugh's.
And do you recognize this writing right there?
That is his handwriting.
All right, and did this money go into real Forge or did it go to the fake Forge?
It went in his fake Forge account.
All right, and did ultimately the law firm have to refund this money?
Again, we refunded the money. Each partner put up money and refunded the money to the client
And why did the law firm have to refund it?
because he stole it.
Who stole it?
Alex Murdaugh stole it.
All right. I'm gonna go to the third page of this exhibit. Do you recognize this particular check right here?
I do.
All right, and what is that?
So this is an insurance proceed payment from, I believe, Southern Fidelity Insurance in the amount of $75,193. That check never even came through our books. He stole it, endorsed it, and put it in his Bank of America account. And we found a copy of it on his desk later as we were investigating.
All right. Did the law firm ultimately have to replace that money?
We replaced that money as well.
Stand by for me real quick. I'm going to show you what's been, I believe, admitted into evidence as States 429.
Okay, this is disbursement sheet for Hirschberger.
All right, and on that particular one, let me, first of all, I'm gonna put it up on the screen, and again, if you can see it, if I need to bring it back to me, to you, let me know, okay?
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna go over to the third page of this exhibit. And this is a disbursement sheet in this matter, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, and we look on this third line, and what does it say right there?
The PMPED attorney fee Forge,
All right, and what's the amount?
$83,333.33, and that's the one we discussed earlier.
That's the one that first came to your attention?
Yes.
All right. Ultimately, go over to this next check. Do you recognize that?
It's the corresponding check for the payment to Forge for $83,333.33.
Do you recognize that signature?
Alex Murdaugh's.
All right, and you recognize that writing right there on the endorsement?
Alex Murdaugh's.
All right, and this is a check that you thought had gone to a legitimate structure?
Correct.
Where did it actually go?
It went to his fake Forge account, the one in his personal name.
I'm going to show you the second page of this exhibit. Do you recognize this check?
I do.
All right, and tell me what this check is.
This is another check payable to Forge for $91,867.50 for the settlement proceeds due to the estate of Jacob Hirschberger.
All right, and just going back real quick, the first amount of $83,000 and change, those were actually represented what?
Those were our fees that would be payable to the law firm.
Okay, and then this money right here, though, that represented what?
Client money,
All right,
client
and
settlement money.
And did it go, where did it go?
It went to the fake Forge account in Alex's name.
All right, and did the law firm ultimately have to repay that money?
We repaid that as well.
So we got two transactions in this particular one. We got the 83.3 and then we have the 91,000. Is that
Yes,
correct?
and I had to correct myself on that one. We're still in the process of paying that one.
All right. And what's the date on that particular one?
December 15th, 2020.
And then the date on,
May 12th, 2021.
all right, and that's roughly around the time that came to your attention as you previously testified?
Yes.
I'll show you what's been marked as States 319. Have you take a look at it?
This is the disbursement sheet for Blondale Gary.
All right. I'm going to go put it on the screen. Again, if you need me to bring it to you, let me know. And at this time, Your Honor, I'd offer 319 in evidence.
No additional objection.
Submit it.
All right, looking at this, we have, what's the first name of the client here?
Angel,
All right. And looking down, we have a recovery amount, and then what's this third line right there?
Forge Structure in the amount of $112,500.
All right. And going to the next page, what do we see?
This is the check payable to Forge in the amount of $112,500.
All right. And did that go to the real Forge or the fake Forge?
It went to the fake Forge in Alex Murdaugh's name.
All right. And whose signature is that?
Alex Murdaugh's.
Going back to the original page, whose signature is that?
Again, Alex Murdaugh's.
What's the date on that? I don't know if you can see it or not.
It looks like 4/9/19.
Okay. Did y'all have to repay that money?
We also repaid that money
All right. Why did you have to repay that money?
because it was due to the client and Alex Murdaugh stole it.
Let me show you what's been marked as States 320. See if you recognize this document.
This is the disbursement sheet on Christopher Anderson.
All right. Your Honor, this time I'd offer States 320 into evidence.
No additional objection, Your Honor.
Submit it.
All right. Again, we have the disbursement sheet. Is that correct?
We do?
All right. And then we have a recovery. Is that correct?
Yes, of $750,000.
And then how much on this disbursement sheet was written to Forge?
$750,000.
Every bit of it.
Yes.
And whose signature is that?
Alex Murdaugh's.
Second page.
A check payable to Forge for $750,000.
What's the date on it?
February 20th, 2020.
Did this go to the real Forge or the fake Forge?
It went to his fake Forge personal account.
In this particular case, were there multiple recoveries?
There were multiple recoveries in this one.
All right. So some of the money, did some of the money actually go to the client back when all of this happened?
Some of the money did go to the client, and when meeting with the client to go over this, he told me that he was unaware of the second settlement.
All right. And how much of the second settlement did Alex Murdaugh take?
The 100% of it, the entire $750,000.
What's the date on that?
February 20, 2020.
Do you recognize that signature right there?
That's Alex. I'm going to show you what's been marked as States 321. See if you recognize this document. This is a disbursement statement, to Dion Martin.
All right. Your Honor, this time the state would offer States 321 into evidence.
No additional objection, Your Honor.
Submit it.
All right. Looking at this particular one, what's the first name of the client here?
Dion?
All right. And a couple things. First thing I want to ask about is we have Right here, what's that third line right there? What does that say?
It says structured for annuity directly to Michael Gunn in the amount
Remind
of,
the jury who Michael Gunn is?
he is the owner of the Real Forge Consulting that would do structured annuities.
Was there any actual structured annuity directly to Michael Gunn?
We were able to verify later that there was no structured annuity to Michael Gunn.
All right. And what was the effect of having that line in this disbursement sheet when it was prepared by the defendant and his staff?
You can see a line where the payment, it says settlement proceeds structured annuity 500 out. So basically what he did here was create a fake fee or a fake recovery that he took a 40% fee on, $200,000. That $200,000 should have been the client's money, but he faked a fee. It's
Right.
just phantom money.
So by putting this line in here, right here, with that fake annuity, then 40% of that would be,
It was counted in as fees under his column in our system.
all right, and so just by that paperwork, poof, you have
Poof, phantom money.
phantom money. Did y'all ultimately have to account for that
We did,
with the client?
we did.
All right, down here at the bottom, you recognize that signature?
Alex Murdaugh's,
You see the date?
8/20/2015.
All right, and then moving on to the next page. And you previously testified that there could be multiple disbursements in a case, is that correct?
That's correct.
And is this one such case?
Yes.
All right. Right here, I'm looking at the second disbursement, and down at the bottom, can you tell me the date on this?
October 6, 2015.
All right, and down at the bottom, right here, what does that say?
Disbursement to Forge,
And what's-
$338,000, $338,056.14.
Did that go to the real forge or the fake forge?
Went to the fake Forge.
Looking at the next page, you recognize that?
That's the check payable to the fake Forge in the amount of $338,056.14, signed by Alex Murdaugh.
All right. Did y'all ultimately have to pay that back to the client?
We did, we paid that and the $200,000 back
And why'd you have to do that?
because Alex had stolen it.
Going to the next page, we have another disbursement in this case, is that correct?
Yes.
All right, and what does this line say right there?
Structure to Forge, marked through $45,000.
Where did that $45,000 go?
It went to the fake Forge account in Alex Murdaugh's name.
All right. Going forward, we see this check, you recognize that?
That's the check payable to Forge in the amount of $45,000
All right, you recognize that signature?
with Alex Murdaugh's.
You recognize that writing right there?
Alex Murdaugh's,
And where did that money go?
to the fake Forge account in his Bank of America, Richard Alexander Murdaugh name.
So we had three things here. We had the phantom fee, correct?
Correct,
We had the $338,000 and change.
correct,
We had the $45,000.
correct.
And did your law firm have to pay all that back?
We paid every cent of it back. The
Why'd you-
attorneys put it in because Alex stole it.
Show you States 315. See if you recognize this.
This is another disbursement for Elise Mallory.
Your Honor, at this time I'd offer States 315 in evidence.
No additional objection, Your Honor.
Submitted.
All right, who's the client's name on this one? Just the first name, please.
Elise,
All right, in this particular, what's the total recovery amount?
$183,528.
And is there an attorney fee?
There is an attorney fee of $30,000, but again, that's reduced, and I'm able to tell that because it's not a third or either 40%.
But that $30,000 ultimately was cut to the firm.
It ultimately was cut to the PMPD.
And who was it credited to, on whose books?
Alex Murdaugh's.
All right, and then there's some fees for about 600 and change, correct?
Yes, expenses.
Expenses. And so what's the remainder?
The remainder is $152,866 that was payable to the forge, and that's the fake forge count.
All right, and his signature, is that right there?
Alex Murdaugh's.
Do you recognize the second page?
That is the check that was payable to forge.
Can you see the date on that?
I can't really see that.
I'm going to hand you back States 314, which is the spreadsheet you prepared. Is that correct?
Yes.
Look down at the bottom. Can you remind the jury what the date is of that particular check?
It was November 30th, 2020.
November 30th, 2020. Okay. Did any of the recovery in this case actually go to the client?
And that one, none of it went to the client.
It either went to Alex fees or it went to where?
To his fake forge account that was doing business as Forge, the fake account with Bank of America.
Was there ever any conversation with Alec about this case as it related to those fees?
There was. Later in the summer of 2021, his secretary called over to accounting and said that he wanted to disperse some money to Elise Mallory. And at that point, we informed her that the money had already been dispersed. So then Alex said that he wanted to give a portion of his fee back to the client because she was just a sweet lady that he felt she needed some funds given back to her. He'd like to do her a favor.
Of the $30,000 in fees?
Yes.
Was that after all of that $152,000, the bulk of that recovery for that case has been instead dispersed to the fake forge account?
Yes.
Do y'all have to account for that and pay the client back?
We did,
And why was that?
because he stole the money.
Going to 322. Marked as States 322. See if you recognize this.
Yes, it's another disbursement that has actually several parts, but it's Jamie and Risher.
Okay. Your Honor, this time I'd offer States 322 into evidence.
No additional objection.
Submit it.
All right, what's the first name on the,
Jamie and
all right. And looking at this particular disbursement sheet, what is this amount right there?
$90,000.
And what's it made payable to on the disbursement sheet?
Forge,
We see a signature right there. It looks a little different. Do you recognize that signature at all?
I still believe it's Alex.
Okay. And going to the next page, what is that?
This is the check payable to Forge in the amount of $90,000.
And what's the date on it?
It cleared on 9/1/16. It was written sometime in August of 2016.
Where did that check go?
It went to the fake Forge account with Bank of America that is in his personal name.
Going to this page of the exhibit, do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And tell me what this is very quickly.
These were some of those client case expenses that we would collect normally. And what you're seeing here is some costs for employee travel on the first line, but then costs paid to Austin Aviation for some airline services, and then some meals and travel within New York.
We have Austin Aviation. Is that like a private plane?
That is a private plane.
And limousine service?
That's a private limousine. Yeah.
All right. Did y'all ultimately refund this money to the client?
We did.
Why was that?
We discovered that those were after the close of the case, and there was no way that they could have been done.
They had been billed to the client?
They had been billed to the client, deducted from the client's disbursement, so we reimbursed those as well when we were giving our clients the money back.
marked as States 323 to your testimony. See if you recognize that.
This is a disbursement for Johnny Bush.
Okay. Your Honor, this time I'd offer States 323 in the evidence.
No additional objection, Your Honor.
Admit it.
All right, very quickly.
Johnny.
First name, Johnny, all right. Down here, we've got, what does that line say?
Forge, $95,000
Where did that money go?
to the fake Forge account that Alec held.
All right. Is that the check?
It's corresponding check for the $90,000 with
Recognize-
Alec's signature.
All right. And did y'all have to pay that money back?
We did,
And why'd you have to pay that money back?
because Alec stole it as well.
Show you States 324, see if you recognize that.
Yes, this is a disbursement to Jordan Jenks.
Your Honor, this time I'd offer States 324 in evidence.
No additional objection, Your Honor.
Admit it.
All right. Right here, looking at this particular one, who's the first name of the client?
Jordan,
Right here on this disbursement, what do we have right there?
a payment to Forge in the amount of $85,000.
Okay. And whose signature down at the bottom?
Alex Murdaugh's,
What's the date?
August 1st, 2018.
Looking at the second page, what is this right here?
The check to payable to Forge for the $80,000
All right, and where did that money go?
to the fake Forge account.
You recognize that signature?
That's Alex's signature as well.
All right, looking over the next page, what is this?
This is a second disbursement with another check payable to Forge in the amount of $65,000.
All right, you recognize that signature?
Alex Murdaugh's,
All right, and what's the next page?
a check payable to Ford in the amount of $65,000 with Alex Murdaugh's signature.
All right, and what date did that clear?
October 4th, 2018.
All right. This $85,000, where did that go?
To the fake Forge,
The $65,000, where did that go?
to the fake Forge account.
Did your law firm have to account for that money?
We accounted for and reimbursed the client due to the fact that Alec had stolen it.
I'll show you what's been marked as States 325, your testimony, and see if you recognize this.
This is another disbursement for Manuel Cristiani.
All right. Your Honor, this time I'd offer States 325.
No additional objection, Your Honor.
Admit it.
All right, first name,
Manuel,
what does this say right here?
Forge, $70,000.
Going over to the next page, you recognize that?
That's the check payable to Forge for $70,000 signed by Alex Murdaugh.
What's the date did it clear, your trust
August
account?
16th, 2016.
Where did this money go?
Went to his fake Forge account.
Did you have to account for this money?
We did.
All right, and why'd you have to account for it?
This money was stolen. This money still has not been paid back. It's under a court order to be paid into the court because there's some dispute about who it belongs to.
But ultimately, the
But
law firm-
ultimately, we funded it and it's paid into the court, so it came out of our pockets again.
show you what's been marked as States 326 to your testimony and see if you recognize this.
This is another disbursement for Mary Duncan.
Your Honor, at this time I'd offer States 326.
No additional objection.
Submit it.
All right. First name of the client.
Mary,
Looking down here, what is that line right there?
settlement proceeds to Forge in the amount of $19,500.
All right. See the date?
October 3rd, 2018.
Do you recognize that at all?
Alex Murdaugh's.
That's the signature, you mean?
Yes.
All right. What's this right here on the second page?
This is the check payable to Forge for $19,500, referencing Mary Duncan settlement proceeds.
And what day did that clear?
October 22nd, 2018.
And how much?
$19,500
All right. Where did this money go?
to its fake Forge account.
Did your law firm have to account for that?
We did, and we reimbursed the client for that
Why'd you have to do that?
because Alex stole it.
Show you what's been marked as States 327. See if you recognize this.
This is a disbursement sheet for Randy Drawdy.
Your Honor, this time I offer States 327 in evidence.
No additional objection.
Let's admit it.
All right, disbursement sheet, what line do we have right here?
Forge, $9,569.30.
Do you recognize that signature?
Alex Murdaugh's.
Looking at the next page,
It's the check payable to Forge for the $9,569.30.
and what's the date on it?
It is dated October 3rd, 2017.
You recognize that signature?
Alex Murdaugh's signature.
All right. Did your law firm ultimately have to account for those funds?
We did, and we reimbursed the client that money as well because it was stolen funds again.
And where did these funds actually go to?
They went to the fake Forge account that was under his control.
All right, I'm going to show you what's been marked as States 328 and see if you recognize this.
This is a disbursement for Thomas Moore.
Your Honor, this time I'd offer States 328 in evidence.
No additional objection, Your Honor.
Let's admit it.
All right, right here on the disbursement, what's the name? First name?
Thomas,
All right. And what does the disbursement say? All
Forge, $125,000.
right. Down here, do you recognize that signature?
It's Alex Murdaugh's on the left.
Whose handwriting does that look like to you?
It looks like Alex Murdaugh's as well. Tommy Moore confirmed with us that he did not sign that disbursement.
Going to the second page, what is this?
This is the check payable to Forge in the amount of $125,000.
Did that go to the real Forge or the fake Forge?
Fake Forge,
All right. And whose writing is that right there on the endorsement?
that's Alex Murdaugh's.
Whose signature on the check?
Alex Murdaugh's.
Did y'all have to account for that money with the client?
We did, we reimbursed him as well
And why'd you have to account for that?
because it had been stolen by Alex.
The ones that you've been describing, this was after you started to pull the thread and all of that started to unravel, is that correct?
That's right.
Was the quote fake forge, as you call it, was that the only thing that you detected as you started to review the activities of Alex Murdaugh while he was a partner in the law firm?
No,
I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 329 to your testimony, and just quickly tell me if you recognize that and what it is.
I do recognize this. This is a list of payments that were stolen by being paid to Palmetto State Bank.
All right, hold on for me real quick. All right, going back to States 329. Again, did you prepare this spreadsheet?
I did.
And is this based on your role as the CFO and going back and reviewing various records and trying to figure all of this out?
Yes, sir.
All right. Your Honor, this time the state would offer States 329 into evidence.
No additional objections, Your Honor, and subject to the court's prior limitations on its use.
It's admitted.
All right, putting this up on the screen. Can you see that all right, or I need to bring it to you?
Yes, and I can see it.
All right. I see up at the top there's some writing on it. Can you tell the jury what that is real quick?
That was a mistake when I made up the worksheet that we discovered when I got here. Those checks were written in the period of 2012 instead of the 7/5 that I had down. So we scratched through and I initialed my correction.
So that says 2012 and then your initials, is that right?
Yes.
And then over here, what is this right here?
That's the client's name that the money was stolen from,
All right, and then what's that?
the civil action court number,
All right, and then the category?
the method that he used to get away with this, and in this payment, it was Palmetto State Bank checks.
And then this line right there?
The date that we put money back into our trust account to be able to refund the clients.
And then finally, the amount.
$2,079,826.54.
Does this include what was we've already gone through in States 314, the other spreadsheet, or is this different money?
It's additional money.
States 314, what was the amount, the total amount?
$2,841,512.55.
And then the new one we're about to talk about?
$2,079,826.54.
Now, you mentioned Palmetto State Bank. This is not the fake forge, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Tell me just generally what you uncovered and how funds were allegedly misappropriated through this method by the defendant.
Palmetto State Bank was the PR on some of these funds, and there was lines on these disbursements to be paid to Palmetto State Bank. On the surface, they looked okay. When I called and asked the bank to give me information backing up the checks, what had happened to them once they were written to the bank, we discovered that the money had been used for paying things on Alex's behalf, like loan payments, equipment purchases, paying back loans to people he had borrowed money from, and everything was for his use.
And then looking at that, was there an official at the bank who was assisting Alex Murdaugh with these transactions?
Russell Lafitte was the one helping convert those funds.
And is Russell Lafitte any relation to you?
Russell Lafitte is my brother-in-law. He's married to my sister's husband.
Marked as States 330, home stretch. States 330 to this trial. Let's see if you recognize that document.
This is the Badger disbursement.
All right. Your Honor, this time I'd offer States 330 in evidence.
No additional objection, Your Honor.
All right. How much were the attorney's fees on this particular case?
$1,240,000.
That's how much the attorney's fees were.
That's the attorney fees.
All right. And then if we scroll down this disbursement, we have, what's this number right here?
$1,325,000.
And that pursuant to this disbursement was supposed to be made out to who?
Palmetto State Bank.
All right. And that's completely separate from these attorney's fees in this case. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's addition.
Did those attorney's fees actually get paid into the firm account?
Those did, yes.
And those were legitimate, correct?
Those were legitimate.
And they were credited to who?
Alex Murdaugh.
And that's completely separate from this additional $1,325,000 below that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. And what happened to that $1,325,000?
That $1,325,000 ended up being converted into payments on his behalf through the bank.
All right. Can you tell me the date on that?
November 19th, 2012.
Now, this particular amount right here, well, let me go. I'm going to show you the page 3 of this exhibit. And is this an email that you found in the records of your law firm?
We did.
All right. And who is this email from and who's it to?
The email is from Russell Lafitte to Alex Murdaugh.
All right. And what does it say right there?
It says, Alex, can you get Jeannie to recut check 43162 dated 11/19/12 as follows? And then it lists 4 different amounts. And it says, thanks, Russell.
All right. And then below that, the next page, is this another email that was found in the records of your law firm?
It is.
And what's the date on this email?
February 6, 2013.
All right. And please, who's the email from?
So this email is from Alex Murdaugh to Russell Lafitte.
All right. And tell the jury what it says.
It gives an amount of $388,687.50, whatever the amount I owe on the Hannah loan, $75K, and whatever the balance would be on the $1,325,000 after these deductions.
And again, remind the jury what the amount that was written to PSB.
$1,325,000.
Is that
In that email, the last line, Alex asked Russell to email me and request that.
all right. Did that actually happen?
Yes,
And so had your staff already cut this check based on the disbursement for $1,325,000?
yes,
And based on this email chain, did you ultimately recut checks made out to Palmetto State Bank
yes, sir,
and the amounts requested?
in the amounts requested.
And those funds, what happened to them?
They were used to pay personal loan payments on Alex's behalf. So again, the funds that he stole and paid obligations that he owed.
Did you have to account to the client for this amount right here?
We did.
And you had to do that because they were misappropriated by the defendant?
That's right.
All right, looking through these checks, are these the checks that were recut by your staff after the request by Alec
Yes,
to Russell and from Russell to you?
correct. And incidentally, in this one, we also reimbursed the client the PR fee because the PR had not done their job. So we made sure that we reimbursed the client for that as well.
Who was the PR?
Russell Lafitte.
And I'm just slowly moving through this exhibit, but are these the various checks and how they ultimately were converted?
That's the information that I got back from Palmetto State Bank showing how they were converted.
I'm looking at this check right here, which is the 5th page of the exhibit. Can you see the date on that?
February 8th, 2013.
Going to this check right here, what's the date on that?
September 13th, 2013.
States 331, see if you recognize this.
This is the correcting disbursement for Arthur Badger that we reconstructed.
And that goes with the prior exhibit, is that correct?
Yes.
Your Honor, this time I'd offer States 331.
No additional objection.
Submit it.
And this just again reflects what you were just talking about and the repayments of those monies, is that correct?
That's correct, where previously it had the $35,000. And so our total repayment to the client was $1,360,000, which is the 35 and the 1.325
And the 35 is the
PR fee. Yes.
I'll show you States 332. And 334. We'll show you 334 first and see if you recognize this document.
This is a disbursement to Natasha Thomas.
All right, Your Honor, this time I'd offer States 334 in evidence.
No additional objection.
Thank you, Your Honor. And while I'm here, States 332.
This is the correcting disbursement that we drafted to return the money to Natasha Thomas.
Your Honor, I'd offer States 332 in evidence.
No additional objection.
Submit it.
All right. Looking at this particular disbursement, again, what's the first name of the client?
Natasha,
All right. And we have various recovery amounts here, is that correct?
that's correct.
We have the actual legal fees received in this case, correct?
Yes.
And who were those actually credited to?
Well, 800 of that is to Alex Murdaugh, and then the other portion of the fee was the $15,000 fee payable to Russell Lafitte as conservator for this case.
Okay. And those fees were actually credited to who?
To Alex Murdaugh.
And on top of that, though, go down to the bottom and we have this last line. What's that right there?
Natasha Thomas, Palmetto State Bank, $325,000.
That $325,000, where did it go?
It went to Palmetto State Bank and was converted into funds for personal use again, paying loans, buying equipment, et cetera,
Personal expense for who?
for Alex Murdaugh.
Did y'all ultimately have to account to the client for that money?
We did.
And why did you have to do that?
Alex stole that money.
You recognize that signature right there?
Yes, that's Russell Lafitte's.
What is that check right there? Do you recognize that?
This is the check that we wrote to Palmetto State Bank,
And what's the date on that?
12/20/2011.
And hold on, real quick, I'm going to go back just to make sure on States 330. This was Arthur. That's the case you just talked about a little bit ago?
That's correct.
The one with the 1.325 million?
That's correct.
And on this disbursement sheet, what was the date?
November 19th, 2012.
All right. Back to Natasha. Now, you mentioned it was often common for monies to be held back for liens. Is that right?
That's right.
And ultimately, the idea is to settle those liens, like with a hospital or something like that, or Medicaid, and then and then ultimately pay the client any excess that you were able to settle underneath. Is that correct?
That's right.
All right. In this case, were certain monies held back for liens?
There was money held back, yes.
Okay. And ultimately, was there an amount that was paid on those liens? And in particular, I'm showing you this line right here that says ACA recoveries.
Yes, there was.
All right. Stand by for me real quick. After we're looking at that particular line, how much was that amount?
$110,965.27.
And was ultimately Medicaid paid back some amount of money?
Yes,
Was it less than their actual bill?
yes,
And so that meant that there was some money left over that should have gone to the client, is that correct?
correct.
Did that money actually go to the client?
No, it did not.
All right, I'm gonna flip towards the end of this exhibit. And show you this check. It's actually the last page of the exhibit. Do you recognize that?
Yes, that's the remaining funds that should have been paid to Natasha after solving that lien, settling that lien. And it was in the amount of $25,245.08.
And can you see the date on that or see when it cleared?
Looks
Sorry.
looks like it was dated maybe 6/13/2012 or either 8, pardon my eyes. And it cleared the bank on 8/29/2012.
All right, you recognize the signature on that check?
Alex Murdaugh's,
All right, and where did those funds go?
those went, again, were converted at Palmetto State Bank into things that benefited him personally, such as loan payoffs, money to them.
Did you ultimately have to account to the client for that money?
We did,
And why'd you have to do that?
because Alex Murdaugh stole it.
And looking through these documents that are attached here, what are these documents as I slowly flip through them?
That's where the money went. So there was payments made to Mr. Charlie Lafitte. There were boat payments paid. There was payments back to a loan from a conservatorship.
Is that a different case that the firm had?
That is
And who was a conservator on that case?
Russell Lafitte,
And what's the name of that particular client?
Plyler.
And there were loans made from that?
Yes.
Loans to who?
There were loans made from that to Russell Lafitte and Alex Murdaugh.
So money from this was used to pay back some of that money?
Yes, sir.
Whose signature is that on this particular check, number 219721?
That's Russell Lafitte's.
And who is that cashier's check made out to?
Randolph Murdaugh III.
Who is that cashier's check made out to?
This is made out to R. Lafitte as conservator for Malik Williams.
And who's Malik Williams? Do you
Malik
know?
Williams was another client that Russell was a conservator for, that Russell loaned money to Alec out of that conservatorship, and this is a payment back on that conservatorship loan.
When you say conservatorship, Russell was put in charge of dealing with clients'
Investing in
money on their
Hampton-
behalf?
Yes.
And he was loaning money to himself and to Alec?
He did out of Plyler. I'm not sure about Malik Williams, but he loaned Alec money out of Malik Williams.
And then money from some of these misappropriations you've identified was used to pay those loans back from the conservatorship?
Correct.
Show you states 333. You recognize this?
This is a disbursement for Russell Lafitte as conservator for Hakeem Pickney.
All right. Your Honor, this time I'd offer States 333 into evidence.
No additional objection, Your Honor.
So admitted.
All right, a little bit ago we were looking at a case of Natasha Thomas. Is this case related to that one?
Yes,
Are they?
they're both in the same accident.
All right. And I'm going to show you the disbursement sheet on this particular one. And again, we have a recovery here. Is that correct?
Yes,
And right here we have legal fees. Is that correct?
correct.
And how much were the legal fees for this particular one?
For this one, there was $4,098,000 that would have been credited to Alec that were payable to PMPED. And we also paid Russell Lafitte a $60,000 conservator fee.
So out of this particular one, there were legit fees earned by, of how much again?
Almost $4.1 million, $4,098,000.
And credited to who?
Alex Murdaugh.
On top of that, though, we scroll down and we have this entry right here. What does that say?
Palmetto State Bank, $309,581.46.
All right. Where did that money go?
Again, that went payable to Palmetto State Bank, and it was used with the other money from Natasha Thomas to pay off loans and for conservatorships and loans that he had made personally, so for Alex's personal benefit.
All right. And right there, do you recognize those signatures?
Yes, I do.
Whose signature is that?
Russell Lafitte,
Whose signature is that?
Alex Murdaugh.
Right here, what is this, the third page of the exhibit?
This is the check payable to Palmetto State Bank for $309,581.46 on the behalf of Hakeem Pickney's settlement.
And did you have to account for that with the client?
We did,
And why did you have to do that?
because Alex stole that money as well.
As we go through this exhibit, are these some of the various documents?
Yes.
Tell the court and the jury what these are, please.
That would be a loan payment on a boat loan that Alec held personally with the bank. Again, another loan payment for that same Murdaugh Charter Bank loan. Check payable back to Mr. Charles Lafitte for a personal loan.
And we don't have to go through every one, but that's generally, these are the expenditures you've identified as personal for Alec.
Yes.
I know we've been going for a long time. You had mentioned that that one instance in which there was the loan payment that should have gone to Randy Murdaugh that instead went to the defendant, correct?
That's right.
And ultimately, that happened twice, and then it was detected, but he paid it back. Is that right?
That's right.
And the matter kind of went away. Is that right?
That's right.
Were there other instances in which Alex Murdaugh used the firm credit card for expenditures that were not business related?
He did.
And in those instances, what had happened?
In the instances that he used it for personal, we would deduct it from his annual bonus at the end of the year, and he'd pay it back.
He'd pay it back, and the matter would be forgotten. Is that correct?
Yes.
When those things were happening at the law firm, were y'all aware of all of this?
No.
And stand by for me real quick. All right, sorry about that. Just real quick. When y'all allowed Alec to pay back the money in those sort of smaller instances, were you aware of all of this?
No, sir.
When you or your staff received these disbursement funds from Alec and his staff, did they cut them in the manner in which they were instructed?
Yes,
And why did they do that?
because they trusted him.
And in the majority of those instances that involve client money, did Alex Murdaugh also receive substantial legal fees in each one of those cases?
Yes,
And in each one of those cases in which that happened, at least on the ones we've gone through, according to your review, did he also misappropriate substantial money on top of that?
yes.
How long have you known Alex Murdaugh?
Since I was 16, so about 40 years,
Worked with him closely for how long?
22, 23 years.
Did you really know Alex Murdaugh?
I don't think I ever really knew him. I don't think anybody knows him.
Thank you. Nothing further.
So I'll stand for a moment. Cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, could we renew our request for limiting instruction? We went a half a day hearing all these financial misdeeds, and I don't want the jury to be lost on what the purpose is.
Any comment, Mr. Waters?
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, I gave this limiting instruction yesterday, and I'll repeat it, that this evidence of these financial crimes and other crimes that you're now receiving testimony on, it's regarding the contention that the defendant was involved in other criminal activity. That is not evidence or proof of the offenses charged in the indictment, those charges being for murder, 2 counts, and possession of a weapon during the commission of a crime, 2 counts. This testimony is being allowed for the limited purpose in assisting the state in proving motive. You may not consider it for purposes of character of Mr. Murdaugh, nor may you consider it as evidence that he has the propensity to commit other crimes, or that it is more likely that he committed the crimes with which he is currently charged. It's being allowed based on the state's representation that it helps explain the defendant's motives for which he is accused. And you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon.
Hi.
You have, show you Exhibit 314. You just put that up. You can do it for me, Doug. This is a summary of, was a listing of clients of the firm who the law firm had to reimburse because of Alex's misconduct. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now you have been, the law firm has been working with various law enforcement agencies since September of 2021, I suspect, sharing all of this information.
Yes.
And with regard to Exhibit 314, it would appear that the law firm, just for all of these clients, have paid out over $2.8 million. Is that right?
That's right.
And in a real way, the law firm is a victim of this conduct.
Correct.
And for each one of these client transactions that the law firm had to repay, I mean, you're aware that Alec has pending criminal charges for every single one of them.
I'm aware of that.
Okay. And the same with the Palmetto State Bank matters that you talked about.
Correct.
He has pending criminal charges for every single one of them.
Yes.
And we're not here today to try those charges on the financial crimes. We're here, you understand, you're testifying because he's been charged with the murder of his wife, Maggie, and his son, Paul.
I
right?
do.
Okay. And they were murdered on June 7th, 2021, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, some of these, it looks like, according to your testimony, that this misconduct has been going on since as early as 2011?
Unfortunately, when we found that out,
Right. So some 10 years before the murders of Maggie and Paul, correct?
that's correct. He managed to fool a lot of people, myself included.
Understand. And I understand you have the right to be very hurt and angry about that. And are you hurt and angry about that?
Oh, yes. I take it very personally. It haunts me that I let this, or that this happened.
You feel like it happened on your watch, and
I think anybody'd feel normal feeling like that. It's a big betrayal of trust.
And Ms. Seckinger, when I'm asking you these questions, I'm not in any way diminishing your feelings and your anger. I'm just trying to flush out how these relate to the murder of Maggie and Paul.
I understand that.
Okay, thank you. But it would appear that it's been going on for years and years and years.
Unfortunately, yes,
Right.
it appears.
And it has cost the law firm in 2021, and still, you know, over $5 million we've paid out.
That's correct.
And when we're talking about the law firm, I mean, we're really talking about lawyers in the firm, his brother Randy, correct?
That's right.
Johnny Parker, who's now the firm's named after,
Right.
Ronnie Crosby,
Right.
Lee Cope,
Correct.
Mark Ball,
Correct.
and others that have come out of their pocket to reimburse clients.
Yes, they did.
Now, the forge. Well, let me strike that. On June 7th, 2021, the day Maggie and Paul were murdered, you went to Alex's office sometime in the early afternoon or mid-afternoon and to try to get to the bottom of where's the fee that Chris Wilson's office says they wrote to you for the Ferris case,
Correct.
right? And he looked at you and he said, "What do you want now?" Right?
Yes, he did when I was coming up the steps.
And you said, "I wouldn't be doing my job if I wasn't up here asking you about this."
That's correct.
And I think you said he kind of had a angry look
He did-
initially.
When I walked up the steps, he gave me a very disgusted look and said, "What do you need now?"
But then once you got in his office, his demeanor changed,
He did.
and he assured you that the check was, the funds were still in Chris Wilson's trust account.
He
Right?
did.
And as sort of fast forward, in September the 3rd, I believe it was, 2021, Annette Griswold from your firm found a canceled check written from Chris Wilson's law firm directly to Alex Murdaugh, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that check wasn't written to Forge Consulting.
No, it was written to Richard Alexander Murdaugh, Esquire.
And of all of these papers that you have been introduced in part of your investigation, that's the only time that, at least in these documents that you brought to court, where Alec has gotten a check directly, personally from another law firm, and it didn't go to PMPED, right?
We discovered during the investigation that there had been another time that had happened, but that was not discovered by myself.
Okay. And that was with Chris Wilson's firm also?
Yes.
But all of the other stuff that you brought here and talked about since 9:30 or so this morning involved this fake forge account, right?
Correct.
And then there's some stuff involving Palmetto State Bank going back 2010, 2011, 12, 13, early on.
Correct.
With regard to the events of June the 7th, when you went and talked to Alex and you were asking him about where's the fee money, you had previously spoken to, I guess, Lee Cope or someone in the firm?
Lee Cope.
And wasn't the concern at the time that Alec was trying to shield income from disclosure in the lawsuit where he was a defendant, where he was being sued following the boating crash where Mallory Beach lost her life tragically?
Yes, at that point, we thought he was trying to shelter money or move money into his wife's name or reduce his income for the year by not claiming tax, by not collecting a fee.
Right, and it really, and one of the reasons you thought that is because you had talked to him about what looked to be an odd way to structure an attorney's fee with the Hirschberger case.
Correct.
And he explained that he didn't care about the tax consequences. He was just trying to get money in the Maggie's name and not his name because of the boating accident.
That's correct.
And that was the concern and alarm within the firm, is that we're not going to participate in any way to shield high income from civil disclosure in a court proceeding.
That's correct.
Because that goes against the ethics and standards of the law firm and lawyers in that firm.
That's correct.
And no one at the time was thinking that Alec was stealing money from the firm, right?
I had my suspicions on whether it was really in there, but we were not pursuing it as stolen money.
Okay. And you had seen that, and I think it was May of 2021 or May 12th or something, that a disbursement sheet where attorney's fees went to Forge on the Hirschberger settlement.
Correct.
Now, it's not the first time the lawyers in the firm have previously structured attorney's fees in big settlement cases, haven't they?
Once. One
time? And the way that works is the money goes from the defendant insurance company or defendant company or the source of payment. It goes not to the law firm and then to the lawyer. It goes to some financial entity, whether it's an insurance company or something, and then that money is then paid out in annuity over the years to the lawyer.
That would be the correct way.
And you delay taxes by not taking the money, right?
Correct.
And that's how it was done in the past.
Correct.
The one time it was done.
Right.
Okay. And your concern here was that's not how you do it, because it looked like the money came into the firm and then it was written out to Forge for structure of a payment according to Alec.
Correct. It would not have been, the way it came in, it would not have been credited to his account. It would have just looked like it was going out as an item, so it would not have been accounted for correctly.
Right.
And he also did not discuss it with anybody in the firm or have permission to do that.
And the one time that it happened previously, I don't know what the amount of the fee was, but the point of the matter is that money never came into the firm, but all the partners knew about it, you knew about it, and you were able to include it in your calculations?
Yes.
Including the 7.5% that the lawyer is responsible for paying into the, I guess, to the
kitty
distribution fund or whatever it is? Okay.
Yes.
That's sort of a leveling account that helps lawyers who haven't had a good year, brings them up, and you know, it just sort of smooths out.
And kind of smooths out overhead, the different offices having different costs and.
But when Alec had given you that explanation and you said, that's not proper, you're gonna get taxed, and he said that, I don't care, you know, I'm trying to get money in Maggie's name, help Michael Gunn out. I mean, you never talked to Alec about the Hershberger fee again, did you?
Not to my recollection. Not since after the murders happened, we did not discuss any of that.
And the Chris Wilson issue was, there was a settlement in the Ferris v. Mack truck case. The law firm receives an expense check to reimburse the firm for their expenses, but where's the fee? Where's the fee? And that's what started the questions being asked.
That's right.
Okay. And you went in on June 7th to ask Alec about that. You know, you got to show me proof if it's in his trust account. Is that right?
Right. I told him we had reason to believe that he had received the money, and I needed proof that he had not.
And during that meeting, he received a call that his father was being put back in the hospital.
Or was in the hospital and was terminal, that they had decided that there was nothing else they could do for him and he'd be terminal.
And you took off your CPA hat and your CFO hat and you befriended him.
Correct.
Because you knew how close he was to his father, is that right?
I do.
And you know, and this father was a well-known lawyer and was a legacy name in that law firm?
That didn't really mean anything to me. I'd just known him since I was 15, 16 years old. I didn't think of him in terms of that. I thought of him in terms of a friend and my friend's father.
Right. And the Alex close to his father?
Yes,
And his mother?
as far as I know.
And his family, he was close to his family.
As far as I know, I had not spent any time with him around his family in over 17 years.
But after you learned that his father was going back in the hospital or was in the hospital and was terminal, well, just fast forward. This was the 7th of June, correct?
Yeah, the Monday, the 7th.
Yeah. And on the 10th, Mr. Murdaugh died, did he not?
I believe that was the date, yes.
Okay, just a few days after this, he died.
Yes.
Of natural causes.
Yes.
And so when you learned on the 7th that his father was terminal or going back in the hospital, you became his friend and you didn't continue your inquiry anymore that day, correct?
No, because I had told him what I needed, and he knew what I was expecting to get back, and I was under the impression he was leaving to go care for his father. And in our firm, we're very family-oriented, and anytime there's an emergency or something we need to do, we grant the person the time off, and I made the assumption he was going to go take care of that.
Right. And then you learned that night that Maggie and Paul were murdered.
Right.
What was I think you said in your testimony that your initial reaction, you were scared, you were afraid. What were you scared of?
Well, when this happened, there was a lot of rumors rolling around. Nothing this violent had ever happened. We didn't know who had gone after his family, if somebody was going to come after him, if somebody was going to come to the office and come after him. There was just a lot of dissettlement within the office. And constantly employees were scared.
But your mind didn't go to, gosh, I bet he killed his wife and son because I asked him about the Ferris fee, right?
No.
Then after that, you didn't continue investigating the Ferris fee. You let Lee Cope deal directly with Chris Wilson.
Lee Cope advised me that he would take over.
Okay. But the inquiry and the Ferris fee didn't stop because Maggie and Paul were murdered, did it?
It did, as far as talking to Alec.
Well, I mean, Alec told you what he told you, and then the inquiry was, is he telling the truth? And let's deal directly with Chris Wilson, right?
Correct.
So the inquiry didn't stop with Maggie and Paul's murder, did it?
It stopped for a period of time,
How long?
a couple of weeks.
Couple of weeks.
Maybe a month.
Maybe a month. The death of his wife and son got him 30 days reprieve on your investigation into the Ferris matter. Is that what happened?
Well, it did, and then we received word from Chris. At that point, we still did not receive the documentation, so it did delay receiving the documentation.
Now let's be clear. When you're looking into the Ferris matter and you go in on June 7th, it wasn't reported to you by Maggie Murdaugh that, hey, I think Alec's stealing money. You didn't have any conversation with Maggie about that, did you?
I never have conversations with Maggie.
Or Paul, he wasn't involved in any way with the Ferris fee, to your knowledge, was he?
I've never had a conversation with Paul.
And then you go, and Lee Cope's dealing with Chris Wilson's office, and then turns out that Chris Wilson sends an email to Alec saying the money's in my trust account, and Alec forwards it on to you and Lee Cope. Is that
Correct.
right? And once that happened, there was no rush to grab the money out of Chris Wilson's trust account, was there? In July of 2021.
We did not make the rush at that point because we had enough operating money and we were going to come back to it. Typically, the attorney dealing with that case would handle it, and Alec was not in the office very much.
Okay. So the firm had plenty of money to operate, and you just needed to get the money in to the firm by the end of the year when you did the bonuses. Is that pretty much how things were being looked at in July of 2021? I
don't know that we would have waited till December, but we just were not doing it at that point in that summer. It was actually just an irregular summer, both personally and professionally, keeping up with other obligations. And time frame to get it.
And so in September of 2021, you're doing your CFO job. You decide to, and you had this Hertzberger thing, on your desk, or, I mean, you said it was on your desk. Was it on desktop, or you just had a sheet of paper?
Well, it's kind of where my important stuff is that I need to get back to, so it's sitting right under a monitor right in front of my face.
And you talked about you had a number of commitments and it's personal issues, I think you said. I don't want to know about your personal issues, but what I do want to establish is Maggie and Paul's murder did not cause you to delay in following up on the Hertzberger matter, did it?
In some ways, yes, because the shock of it and the delay and the things going around the office did, but the true delay came in me finding the time to do it.
Yeah, you had a lot of other things going on.
Yes.
And what you decided to do is to see if there were some other kind of structured fees that Alec had done in 2021 to sort of, like you did the Hertzberger case, because you needed to know what his gross collections were and how much he owed to the firm, and that's why you looked in September 2021, right?
Correct, and I'm also still suspicious, in my own mind. I wanted to make sure that he had accounted for everything and that we had indeed collected everything.
Right. And so you ran a report the law firm of clients with settlements? I mean, tell us what you did.
Well, I started running a report of all the fees that he had collected and started looking through those disbursements. And then it came to me that I could probably shortcut this a little just by printing off payments to Forge. And then I've started focusing on those first. And that's when I found the checks and the information that I found.
And that, well, let's start. Do you remember about what his fee collections were about September of 2021?
I've got so many numbers in my head, but they were over $1 million, probably between $1 million and $2 million.
2 to 3 million?
$1 million to $2 million.
Oh, $1 million to $2 million of fee income that he had collected.
Correct.
When you run this report. And
Correct.
Did that include or not include the 792 on the Ferris case?
It did not.
So if you add the Ferris case, it could have been over 2 million?
I guess I can't swear to what his number was. I look at numbers all day long, but that's the recollection of the range he would have been in.
And after this, after you've learned about this fake Forge account, Alec didn't, I mean, and he was forced to resign from the firm
That's
the
correct.
day or the next day, right?
The next day.
Okay. And so that money that came into the firm was used by the firm to pay off some of these victims, right?
We have done some of that, yes.
Now the discovery of the fake Forge account, when you were when you ran the report on Forge, that shocked you, didn't it?
Yes.
That information had been in the systems of the law firm going back, I guess, to 2015 when that fake Forge account was first opened.
I don't know when I don't think it was open that far back, but I had no reason to suspect anything was going on. We had no clients complaining about money missing. Trusted him. We had no reason to look.
Right.
It fooled a lot of people, like I said, myself and us included.
And that's a good point. Their clients weren't calling up complaining around June 7th that, hey, y'all need to be looking at Alec because, you know, something's amiss here. That wasn't happening around June 7th, was it?
No, and shamefully, when we did talk to the clients, they talked about how much they trusted Alec and how much he thought of them and how that they were shocked and confused by the fact that he had manipulated them and confused them all these years.
And so it sounds to me like on June 7th, you didn't observe some pressure cooker going off within the firm as to how Alec was handling his business.
I don't know about anybody else's pressure cooker. I knew I was putting pressure on them to get the answers for the Ferris fees.
And it was a brotherhood of lawyers that in the past, if they've caught with getting more than what they were entitled to, they pay it back and you let bygones be bygones. That's how it's operated in the past, right?
On trust, yes.
Right. Now, so you ran a report on information that had been in the systems for years. Is that correct?
Correct.
And the tragic murders of Maggie and Paul didn't do anything to affect what was in your systems.
No.
Right. Right. And you just started looking because you had had a conversation with Alec back in May about the Hirschberger fee going to Forge, not in an appropriate structured manner. And that was in early May, and you never had another conversation with him about that, right?
Well, May and June, in between, it was late May and June. the conversations about both were kind of in tandem, because every time we would talk about Ferris, he would bring up, I'm going to structure fees. But it never specifically readdressed the fact that Hirschberger, it did address the fact that he should not be doing this again, and that if he should, he needed to let somebody know. I believe Alex, meanwhile, was going around complaining to my partners about why I was on his case.
To his partners?
Yes.
And the, now just to be clear, the Ferris fee money was, I mean, it didn't show up on any of these reports, and it was all paid into the law firm, was it not?
It was sometime after September.
So here you are on September the 3rd, and you are running a report. You see a lot of forged checks on Alex's client files, and you start printing off the checks.
That's correct.
And that's how you discovered it. I mean, it was that Alex, and not only he's signing checks to forge, he's endorsing the checks and putting them into the bank.
Correct. And at the same day is when Annette found the check on his office that had been payable to him for the Ferris fees.
Yeah, I was going to get to that. So
Okay.
it just, I mean, that was pure coincidence.
Yes,
That
the
it happened
timing
on
of
the
the
same
timing
day.
of that's pure coincidence. Yes.
And Alec, as you understood, was confronted that perhaps the next day or that
On
day.
Friday morning. I believe that was Friday the 3rd.
So it was the same day that you,
I did mine on Thursday, the 2nd.
so the 2nd you did
Yes.
yours. Okay. Now, on the 7th in the afternoon, Alec called you and asked you what his balance was in his law firm retirement plan,
Yes, sir.
and he told you he was working on the financial disclosure for the boating accident case,
Yes.
and he had called you on other occasions to get that balance because he was filling out financial statements for one thing or another, right?
He had before, yes.
Okay. And let me, do you know, well, you know that he didn't have any life insurance on Maggie or Paul, do you know that?
I have no awareness of that.
No, that's all the questions I have.
Redirect.
Very briefly, Your Honor. You were asked some questions about when you had the conversation about the Ferris fees, and what was your concern then with just the Ferris fees back at that point in time on June 7th?
That he was trying to shelter money from the boat wreck or move assets out of his name or either delay collecting fees. So trying to hide income from the boat wreck.
At that point in time, did you have any idea about any of all of this?
I did not.
You were asked about prior instances in which there had been like the loan, the double loan payment and the credit cards, and Alec paid that back, right?
That's right.
And he paid that back and everything was forgotten, is that correct?
That's right.
You were asked about whether or not all of this was in your systems.
That's correct.
And it was in your systems, wasn't it?
It was.
Since 2011, correct?
That's right.
And he had gotten away with it all that time.
He did.
I believe you testified that on June the 7th, 2021, when you went in to talk to Alex Murdaugh, that you had your suspicions, correct?
I did.
And you demanded what? What did you demand from
I
him?
demanded proof that the money was actually in the account. I wanted the ledgers showing the transactions.
And did you tell him what you believed? Did you tell him why you wanted that proof?
I told him I had reason to believe that he had received the fee payable to him.
You were asked a little bit about the law firm, and his father was in the law firm or had been?
He had been, yes.
Was his grandfather in the law firm?
Yes.
Was there a long history of that family name in this law firm?
Yes.
Is it the most prominent law firm in the area?
I believe so, yes.
A very prominent family name?
Yes.
All this has been in your system since 2011?
Yes.
Once the murders happened, it didn't seem right to be raising those issues with the defendant then, did it?
No, it didn't.
Don't lead the witness.
After the murders happened, did it seem right to you to raise those issues to the defendant?
No, as I stated earlier, we were concerned about the welfare of Alec and the feelings of himself. He was not at work, and we were trying to make sure that he was emotionally okay and able to deal with things before we pressured him about anything.
And then just a few weeks later, just in July, are you still in shock from all of these murders?
Yes,
And did ultimately you get an email from Chris Wilson?
I did on July 19th.
And what did that email say?
Chris said that he had the money in the trust available to us.
He's got the money, so no big deal, correct?
Correct?
Did you still, though, in the back of your mind, have some suspicions going back for a while?
I had suspicions that I didn't really believe that because I'd yet to see the ledger or the proof, and it seemed like there was no reason not to send that to me if something wasn't going on.
When ultimately you turned back to these issues and that Chris Wilson check was found, did that result in the uncovering of all of this?
It did.
Did that result in him losing his job at the law firm,
It did.
where his family name had been a fixture there for decades?
Correct.
Did that result in him losing his license to practice law?
It did.
And the defense asked you that. Did that result in him facing a ton of criminal charges based on all of that?
Yes.
All of that was on the cusp of being uncovered, was it not?
Yes.
Was that on the cusp of being uncovered?
Yes.
Answered. Any further exam?
Very briefly, Ms. Seckinger, I mean, finding the Chris Wilson check was coincidental to your work on the Forge account research, correct?
Yes, but as we uncovered the forge, we knew we had a problem.
I understand. And it was the Forge issue that led to all of this.
It would have eventually been the issue if we'd requested Chris Wilson. Regrettably, that we did not in July, we would not have received the money because the money was not in there. We found that out later.
Well, we'll find out about that, but the Chris Wilson issue is a one-off compared to all these other transactions that you brought here today, right?
That's right.
All right, thank you.
You may step down.
Thank you.